Ask most people about the climax of Exodus, and they'll describe the parting of the Red Sea, the dramatic escape, walls of water, Pharaoh's army swallowed by the waves. It's the scene that made the movie. But here's the thing, the ancient Israelites wouldn't have agreed. For them, the real climax comes 3 months later at a mountain in the desert with a legal contract. The Exodus wasn't about escape, it was about what they were escaping to. The Red Sea was a dramatic way station, Sinai was the destination, liberation needed a purpose, and that purpose was covenant relationship. The narrative arc rises from slavery in Egypt through the plagues and the sea crossing, but it peaks at Sinai. That's where the story was always heading. To understand why Sinai matters more than the Red Sea, we need to understand what kind of document was created there. But first, a word about salvation. In modern usage, salvation often means individual spiritual rescue, souls saved for heaven. Biblical salvation means something different, concrete, collective deliverance from national oppression. When God saves Israel, God physically liberates an enslaved people from a foreign empire. This isn't to diminish later theology, it's to read the text in its own context. Liberation needs a purpose. The Sinai covenant is radically different from earlier biblical covenants. The Noahide covenant, God's promise never to flood the earth again, was universal and unconditional. God made the promise, humanity had no obligations. The rainbow was the sign. The Abrahamic covenant promised land and descendants, again unconditional. God bound himself to Abraham's family with no strings attached. The Mosaic covenant breaks this pattern. It's bilateral, both parties have obligations. It's conditional. Blessings depend on obedience. God makes no unconditional promises here. Protection depends on Israel's faithfulness. This isn't the same kind of relationship. It's a formal legal arrangement between unequal parties. The Mosaic covenant follows a precise pattern that scholars recognized in the 20th century, the suzerainty treaty. A suzerainty treaty, that's suzerainty, was an agreement between a powerful king called a suzerain and a weaker vassal state. The Hittites, who dominated Anatolia from 1500 to 1200 BCE, left dozens of these treaties, and they follow a 6-element structure. First, the preamble, who's speaking. Second, the historical prologue, why we're here, what the suzerain has done for the vassal. Third, stipulations, what the vassal must do. Fourth, deposit, where to store the document. Fifth, witnesses, who holds both parties accountable. Sixth, blessings and curses, consequences for obedience or disobedience. Now let's see this treaty pattern in action in the actual biblical text, Exodus chapter 19, verses 3 through 8. God speaks to Moses, thus shall you say to the house of Jacob, you have seen what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. That's the historical prologue, the backstory establishing why this relationship exists. Then, now therefore, if you will obey my voice and keep my covenant, that word if is crucial. This is conditional. The stipulation follows, obey and keep covenant. The reward, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. The people respond, right? All that the Lord has spoken, we will do. Right? That's formal treaty acceptance. This isn't religious poetry, it's legal language. The structure matches what we find in Hittite diplomatic archives. Biblical writers used familiar political frameworks to express theological truths. The treaty elements don't appear only in Exodus 19. They're distributed across the entire narrative from Exodus through Deuteronomy. The preamble appears in Exodus 20, I am Yahweh your God. And the stipulations fill Exodus 20 through 23. The deposit instructions describe the Ark of the Covenant. The pattern holds. One element posed a problem. Polytheistic treaties invoked multiple gods as witnesses. divine beings who would punish treaty violations. Israel's monotheism ruled this out. The solution was elegant. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today. Deuteronomy uses this formula repeatedly. Heaven and earth replace the divine witnesses. Same function, different theology. The created order itself testifies to the covenant. This shows theological adaptation of a political form. The biblical writers weren't copying blindly. They were transforming a genre for their purposes. The curses reveal something striking. Deuteronomy 28 lists consequences for covenant violation: siege, starvation, exile, disease. In 1958, scholars discovered that the Assyrian king Esarhaddon, that's Esarhaddon, imposed a treaty on his vassals in 677 BCE containing nearly identical curse language. You shall eat the fruit of your own body, appears in both texts. The sky over your head shall be bronze, appears in both texts. This isn't plagiarism, it's using recognized legal language to convey binding seriousness. When ancient readers heard these curses, they understood this is a real treaty with real consequences. The curses aren't arbitrary divine threats, they're standard treaty enforcement. So what difference does this make for reading the Hebrew Bible? When you read Torah laws, you're reading treaty stipulations, terms of a political relationship between God and Israel. When prophets accuse Israel of unfaithfulness, they're acting as covenant prosecutors. Hosea, Amos, Jeremiah, they're not just preaching, they're filing legal briefs, they cite specific violations, they invoke the curses. When destruction and exile fall on Israel, the text presents this as treaty enforcement, not divine caprice. God isn't acting arbitrarily, God is enforcing the terms both parties agreed to at Sinai. This reframes obedience entirely. A common misconception: Israel earned God's favor through following the law. The treaty structure refutes this. The historical prologue always comes first. I am Yahweh your God who brought you out of Egypt. God saved them, then gave stipulations. The rescue precedes the requirements. Obedience isn't earning salvation. It's responding to salvation already given. The Exodus story answers a question: why did God save Israel? Answer: to enter covenant relationship. Freedom from slavery was freedom for something. The Sinai covenant shaped everything that followed in Israelite religion. Temple worship, prophetic critique, wisdom literature, even the later Christian understanding of covenant all flow from this moment. The mountain in the desert, the thunder and smoke, the tablets of stone, not just dramatic staging, the formal establishment of a relationship that would define a people for 3,000 years. Ancient Near Eastern diplomacy became the framework for understanding the divine. The Red Sea was the rescue. Sinai was the relationship. Ancient Israel knew which one mattered more. The waters parted so the people could reach the mountain. The escape enabled the encounter. Liberation found its purpose in covenant.